sleeping kitty. Sleeping kitty. Hi, babies. Hi, BookTube. I'm here with an original... Hi, BookTube. I'm here with an original tag. This is the Canadian Stereotypes book tag, and there is a Canadian book tag. I'll link that video down below, but that had to do with things like maple syrup and hockey and that kind of stuff. What I chose to do instead was kind of take a stereotype from each province and territory in Canada. So I'm sorry if you find any of this offensive. I researched the stereotypes, and this seems to be the things that people come to a general consensus on. I'm not saying they're true. Okay, first of all, Alberta. It's the conservative bastion in a generally liberal country. And so the book for this is a book that challenged or awoke your political views. And for me, that would be in the 12th grade when I really just started getting interested in politics and social justice, reading 1984 and Brave New World. I read them, I had 2 English classes, and I read those both at the same time, and they've just really formed the basis of my political beliefs. I won't tell you in what way. Number 2, British Columbia is weed smoking hippies. And this is a book that messed with your mind. So I'm gonna have to go with Wittgenstein's Mistress, which is about a woman who believes she's the last person on Earth, and she's obviously dealing with some mental issues as well. So a lot of confusing and conflicting things happen within the story itself. The character herself becomes confused, which adds on top of everything else, but also trying to reconcile the philosophy with the plot and the character within the book really took a lot of working through for me, and it really left me in a state of confusion for a little while before I tried and reconcile it all. Yeah. Next is Manitoba, and Manitoba is cold. So this is a book that takes place in winter, and I'm going to choose a Canadian book for this, and that's Maria Chapdelaine by Himon, and this is the story of a young girl in northern Quebec in the middle of winter, and she is waiting for her lover to return, but being a historical, you know, novel, not having cars and snowplows and all those handy things that we have now, the survival of her lover coming back is not guaranteed, and it's a very beautiful story. 4, Saskatchewan, flat but fertile. This is a short book that packs a punch, and I'm gonna have to go with We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. And what Shirley Jackson does in this novella, because it's, I don't know how long it is. It's at least 100, at most 150 pages, I think. What she is able to do in that time in creating that world and creating those characters and that history and that story and that level of engagement in such a short book is astounding, because there's a lot of books that are like 500 plus pages that aren't able to do that. So this is, you know, a short book and is able to do a lot in just that little amount. Ontario. This is where I'm from. We're self-centered, obviously, because Ottawa's in Ontario, which is the capital. Toronto is basically like Canada. I mean, admit it. Ontario is the best, so this is an overhyped book that you didn't like. So, I'm gonna have to go with Illuminae. I think my distaste for this book is well documented, because, man, that book was making the rounds and it sounded so interesting, but it was horrible on every level. That romance, I just had to roll my eyes and laugh at it. And to have people say like, oh, I really did like the romance. I'm just like, I'm just not getting something. I don't want to tell people I don't want people to tell me I deserve stars in my hair and stuff like that. Just meaningless romantic statements. Yeah. Okay. Quebec. When I think of Quebec, I think of religious profanity, such as Tabernacle, or even the word for profanity is sacre, or consecration. So it has a lot to do with religion. So this is a book with beautiful language, but gross imagery. And I'm going to go with another Canadian book. This is The End Body Problem by Tony Burgess. I've talked about it before. And it is very graphic in the imagery, like body parts being chopped up and eaten, and body parts are still moving. It's kind of like a zombie novel, but the zombies aren't necessarily have any level of consciousness. It's just that the bodies keep moving after death. And it's really weird, but quite well written. Yeah. Number 7 is Newfoundland and Labrador. And when you think of Newfoundland, you think of the accent. So this is a book that's written in dialect. And my go-to answer for this has to be Ulysses, because there are a lot of instances of dialect and a whole chapter written in dialect as well. Yeah, if you haven't heard the Newfie accent, where have you been? Definitely like search it up on YouTube, because it's an amazing accent. It's awesome. Number 8 is New Brunswick, and there were I want to apologize, because a lot of people online said that it's the forgotten province. People tend to forget about it, so that's a stereotype. Forgotten Province, a book that was initially good but then faded with time. And for me, that has to be A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which made it to my list of 2016 best books because I read it in November and it was still fresh in my mind when I made that list. But now that I'm like 7-8 months removed from reading it, I don't look at it with the same kind of admiration that I initially did. It's kind of faded from my mind, and yeah, it's forgotten. 9, Nova Scotia, seafood. So this is a book that takes place on the water. And for me, I'm going to go back to a childhood favorite called The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi. And this is about a young girl. It's a historical novel. I don't know the exact dates. But, you know, a time when ladies are expected to be prim and proper and dressed. And the paranoia about having women on board a ship. But the thing that she wants to do is be a sailor. So she dresses as a male and gets a job as a sailor, and, you know, lives life on the sea and encountering pirates and all that kind of cool stuff. Number 10, PEI. And when you think of PEI, you think of the potatoes. And when you think of potatoes, you think of something filling, right? So this is a book that filled your mind with new ideas. And I'm going to go back. I don't know about what you guys read in elementary school, but in mine it was a lot of very kind of like still children's literature, even when we were in 8th grade. And we never really talked about any classics aside from like The Outsiders, which is still kind of like a classic children's novel. So when I got to high school and was immediately faced with classics, it opened up my mind and filled me with all these new ideas and this awesomeness. I really grasped onto classic literature at that time. So the first book I really remember in grade 9 really liking was Romeo and Juliet, and like learning about it and the different aspects of it. And then later on learning more about it in university. Yeah. 11, the Yukon. And when I think of the Yukon, I think of history and I think of the gold rush, the Yukon gold rush. So this is a book that's pure gold, one of the books you've ever read. And I've answered, and I've talked about this book so many times, so I'm just going to say Gold's Book of Fish by Richard Flanagan. Number 12, Northwest Territories. And again, I think about history. I don't know what it is about up north that I think about a lot of history, but I think about the Northwest Passage. So this is a book that took you a few tries to get through. As with the Northwest Passage, it took us a lot of time trying to figure out how to get through it, right? And I'm going to go with the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. Initially because of the language, obviously, I don't know if there's probably are translations of it in modern English, but I read it in the original language the original English that it was written in, and initially struggling with that because I didn't encounter it until I was about 16. And then reading it in bits and pieces from there. I've never read the Canterbury Tales from cover to cover, like in one kind of one sitting. I never really sat down and like read from cover to cover. I've always encountered it in bits and pieces throughout reading, and then, you know, trying to fill in those holes of reading it. So yeah, Canterbury Tales by Chaucer took me a few tries and a few different methods to get through it. Then 13, Nunavut, which is our newest territory in this part of Canada. And it's not like we took a part and like attached it to Canada. It was already there and we just kind of drew new lines on the map. So this is a book that kind of introduced you to a new genre. And I'm going to go with some Canadian books that I've read and a new genre that I wanted to get into, and that was Westerns, and this was last year. And I picked up 2 Westerns by Canadian authors. I picked up Winter Family by Clifford Jackman, which was kind of marketed as a Quentin Tarantino type, you know, lots of mindless violence and that kind of stuff. It turned out to be something quite different. It was more bits and pieces, almost like short stories that were connected, instead of this kind of one big violent narrative. There was a bit of violence, but, you know, not enough violence. And then I read The Outlander by Gil Adamson, which was an interesting take on the Western, and that it was a female running away from her marriage, and her experiencing life out on the Canadian frontier type, but when you think of like Westerns, you know, encountering that kind of stuff. So it's quite cool. I'm glad I delved into that world. I put out a call on Twitter to people who wanted to be tagged, and I have a list here. I'm assuming if you liked it that you wanted to be tagged, and if you left a comment, I definitely tagged you. So here we have Laura Frey, Dustin at Book Babble, Aaron at Waiting Moose, JD Archer, Aaron at The Bibliotherapist, William at Bald Book Geek, Katie at Paper and Planes, Jason Purcell, and Dessa Bayrock. So I've hit links to their channels, and I think Dessa has a blog. I'll link them down below. That is the Canadian Stereotypes book tag. Don't wait to be tagged to do it. Just do it. And thank you for watching.